Okay, well, thank you so much, Mr. Elrich, for joining us today, for making the time for us. So, of course, the primary election results are final. You're confirmed as our Democratic nominee, and some time has passed now. So, how do you feel now?
I feel better than I did when I was in the middle of the recount.
Mm.
The good news, it was thorough. The bad news is because, the decision the governor made, it really did delay the ability to count. And, anytime you have a delay in vote counting, it leads to, people asking questions like, why is this happening? And so hopefully, the state legislature or the governor fixes this before the general election, because we're even going to have more voters. We could even have more mail-in voters. And of course, it was the mail-in votes, which they weren't allowed to count until 2 days after the election, that triggered all this delay. So I feel better, that you're no longer waiting for what the number is every day. And it's, time to move on and continue working on things we've been working on.
Thank you. And, of course, we know that it was such a close vote, a 32 vote difference. What would be your message to all these residents that are under your leadership who did not support you?
I mean, it depends why you didn't support me. I mean, if you were upset because we had mask mandates or we closed businesses to keep people alive, I'll just, you'll be upset with me, and I'll tell you that I think we made the right decisions to protect the health and safety of the residents of Montgomery County. I'm proud of the fact that we're, if not one of the most vaccinated counties in the country, that our death rate is far lower than the national death rate, and we were able to keep people as safe as we were going to keep them. And they were the right health decisions, and I stand by that. For people who are concerned about, kind of the barrage of what I'll say is just flat out misinformation about either economic development or housing, we've been working on those for the last 3 years. I will say 2.5 of them were in the middle of COVID. And so it certainly had an effect on our budgets and our ability to do things. I mean, I had a lot of things I wanted to do when I got elected, but when, I inherited a $90 million deficit the first year, and then the next 2 years, the council says we're doing same services budgets. Same services means same services. And we struggled just to keep things going as they were. We didn't have room to do things that, I personally wanted to do moving forward. And so, stuff got delayed to some extent. But there are things we kept working on. We put money into early childhood education every year, additional money, which is something I said I was going to do. They continued the planning for a bus rapid transit system. So we're in a situation now to start going to the federal government for money. This last budget, which I think really shows the benefits of what we did. We had changed, the voters had changed the tax system that I kind of led on, pointing out to the council we were working with a seriously flawed tax system. This budget, gave us the resources to put record money into schools to help deal with learning loss and what they needed to, be more competitive, which has helped them actually bring teachers in. So that's been a success. We invested in raising police pay, something I'd asked for 2 years earlier, but this budget, we were able to get that into the budget. We put record amounts of money into affordable housing, including creating a new $49 million acquisition fund to help nonprofits quickly buy properties when they come on the market. Then they have a limited window to act in. Over the years, a lot of properties slipped by because we didn't have the money to be able to help them quickly complete transactions. This allows them to complete transactions. And we work, really hard to change things like the way we do procurement in the county. We have local preferences now, including points and evaluation and price preferences for local businesses, and in permitting. We made major changes in how we act as a permitting agency. And I think that's helped us, actually grow a life sciences business. We know that we're in a competitive environment for life sciences, and we've landed major companies here in the middle of COVID because we continued to recruit and we continued to make sure that if they had issues, we would address it. So I think people who are concerned about economic growth will get a better picture of where we are. And I think on the housing, money's not going to solve this problem. And county housing policies just don't work. And they haven't worked. I was on a phone call just before I came in here, we were talking about, celebrating, 50 years of MPDUs. We have 6,700 units to show for 50 years of MPDUs, and moderately priced dwelling units. So we don't even have a reasonable number that we've produced over 50 years, and our policy serves too few people. It was created, 50 years ago at a time when the population was very different. It was a program that was advertised as housing for teachers, firefighters, and police officers. Those were the low-paid people who had a hard time getting into the market. Today it's the restaurant workers, the retail workers, lower paid, workers that don't even make it anywhere close to what teachers, firefighters, and police officers make, and they don't qualify for assistance. So we never changed our targets to address, a broader range of people at the bottom. And we have this situation, and Bethesda's kind of poster child for this, where our moderately priced dwelling units serve, people earning 60 to 75% of area median income, maybe up to around $80,000. If you're above that, you can't afford the market units in Bethesda. If you have a $2,500 one-bedroom apartment, you need $100,000 income. So we need, and what we're going to be proposing is broadening the range of housing that we actually help nonprofits provide. The other thing is government doesn't build housing. We work with the nonprofit partners, and we provide funding for them to own and operate. And so we want to make sure that going forward, we start serving a broader range of people than we've ever served. This is going to take, the council's going to have to, really think about this. You cannot meet either existing demand or future demand if you only require 12.5% to 15% of a project to be affordable. You might as well stop talking about solving the problem if that's where we're going to get stuck. We're going to have to be willing to ask for more if we're going to talk about housing everybody who lives in Montgomery County. So, we're prepared to continue moving forward. I think people will see where our money's going. I think we've got to do a better job, and hopefully the press can help us occasionally when we do press releases and we talk about what we're doing. It would be good for people to understand what we're doing, but we're going to do a better job on our part to make sure that our residents get a better picture of what Montgomery County is doing on economic development and affordable housing. Because these are important issues to people in the community. They're important to me. I think, you all know I'm pretty progressive, and I'd like to do things that, advance the social justice causes. If you don't have a healthy economy throwing off enough tax revenue, you won't be able to do that stuff. So I'm as committed to growing the economy as anybody else is, because it's an integral to being able to do the things we want to do going forward. And I know a lot of new council members share those goals.
Thank you. And kind of in the same vein, you talk about communication, helping residents get a better picture of what the county's actually doing. I mean, is there anything else specific that you think you might change in your leadership going forward after seeing the vote?
If the vote's about, the issues, we just talked about, there's one group of issues I wouldn't change at all. Our health response was the right health response. I think, we were doing things. We got accused of not doing things. It's amusing because everybody sees the same data. They know that, for example, the lack of jobs and decline in jobs in the county stretches back more than 12 years. So this idea that I changed it, I don't have the power to change policy. When people can get away with saying, well, you literally blocked developments. I never blocked a single development in Montgomery County. Never stopped a single affordable housing project. If anything, we pushed to get more affordable housing out of projects rather than accepting the county minimums. So I think, what the problem is, if people understood what we were doing, and frankly, and I think we talked about this before, I was publicly funded, right? I had $1 million total. We had a TV ad. We did a couple of mailers. When we got bombarded within the last 10 days, 2 weeks, with a massive number of negative ads with accusations that were not close to true, we had no ability to respond. There was no way to get more money. I had matched all the matching money I was going to get. And to be able to go on TV and say, look, there's another story here, or you're not seeing it, we couldn't do that. And if I were a voter and, I saw that bombardment of things and frankly, the misinformation the Washington Post put out and enabling a candidate to be able to say the Washington Post says, the Washington Post says, that was, really difficult to push back on when I didn't have the means to. But that aside, the important thing is that people understand what we're doing. The council's going to have to change housing policy. I can talk about what I'd like to see them do, but if we don't do rent stabilization, thousands of people will lose their housing units. So if you care about affordable housing, you got a dilemma here. You decide you stand on this side or you don't stand on that side. If you want more, construction, more acquisition, we need better right of first refusal laws. We need stronger willingness to invest in affordable housing and require more affordable housing. So we will continue to put that forward. And I'm optimistic with the new council, we're going to get better discussions about these things.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I was going to ask that. Have you thought about what the impact might be of this new council? Obviously, there's going to be a lot of new members.
So, I know a lot of them,
Yeah.
and I've talked to a lot of them, and I feel there's, a lot of them share, a common sense of, the importance of equity and social justice. And you can see it in the work they did when they weren't council members. And as they campaigned, they talked about some of the things that I've been really concerned about. And I think all of them want to see efforts to continue to grow the economy here. So I feel like we're going to have, a good partnership. Optimistic about, kind of changing tone with this larger group and a very different group. And I think that we're poised to be able to do some really good things together.
Good. All right. Thank you. And Hans Riemer obviously came in third place. He got about 20% of the vote. So, do you think his campaign hurt you, helped you, or had any effect?
Yeah, he was, he focused on some things that just really troubling. An ad where you say the county executive closed schools. Really? Because I actually didn't do that. And so here's a sensitive issue in the community, and he, chose to run a primarily negative campaign. And if people think you close schools, people were really, upset about it. Well, I didn't close schools. It was never my decision. That was a school system decision. And the same thing on affordable housing. He was the chief one claiming that, you blocked affordable housing projects. And it's like, not actually. And, it's true I voted against master plans in Bethesda. And this is an important point. When I was on the council, people were always saying, well, we get all this density in the county and then we'll have economic growth. We'll have jobs and housing. And then the architects of that run a campaign saying there's no jobs and housing in Montgomery County. Well, it's their policies that got put in place. If you listen to the rhetoric, I was the one vote. Well, one vote doesn't block anything. In fact, these things, some of the things I thought were wrong, didn't pan out in terms of addressing either the housing issues or the economic growth issues. I do think that, and I said it at the time, that when the county back then still does, had 10 million square feet of empty office space. We have the lowest commercial property taxes in the region. And it's like, if you're the lowest tax place and you've got empty space and you're not filling it up, there must be something else wrong more than the lack of density. And giving density didn't solve the problem. And what we tried to do when we came in was say, okay, why do people not want to do business here? Which is why Cindy Katz and I did a listening tour. And we talked to businesses and we made changes in permitting and procurement in response to what we heard from the business community. So I was always, bothered by this focus on simplistic solutions as opposed to understanding why we were where we were in the region. I've spent a lot of time looking at policies in Northern Virginia, which actually make better sense than our policies, in both zoning policies and taxing policies in Northern Virginia. I've been trying to talk to people about adopting structures that are similar, particularly in the commercial taxing area, to what Northern Virginia does, because they've been successful and they've been able to build more infrastructure than we have, but they've been able to do it with a different tax structure than we have. And I think that bears looking at. It's sort of like if somebody's eating your lunch, you ought to try to figure out how they got your lunch. And that's what we've been trying to do, is figure out, what are the things we don't do or don't do as well that our competitors do? And how do we bring, how do we adopt the county or get the county to adapt to changes that would make us more competitive. And so I think, that kind of negative ad, that was constantly run was harmful. I won't say it wasn't, but I will say it wasn't true.
Thank you. And of course, obviously Montgomery County is heavily Democratic, but your opponent, Reardon Sullivan, what do you think about the strategy of him trying to, go after Blair's votes, Reamer's votes, and what are you going to do to make sure that you do get those votes?
Well, actually, there are a lot more voters who didn't vote than there are people who voted. And, I feel, pretty good about this as a Democratic county. And, we may disagree on some things, but I think there are issues where there's broad agreement, particularly with, some of the folks, who voted for Hans. I understand there was a lot of concern about affordable housing. And unfortunately, we didn't ever, people say, well, this is thoroughly debated. The debates are kind of a joke. When you get 1 minute to answer a question and then a 30-minute rebuttal, you have a serious discussion and something like that? No. And, real debate would have been, you talk about something in depth for 5 minutes. People who can't talk for 5 minutes about housing or economic development probably get sorted out pretty quickly. But I think, we needed something more robust if the people really wanted to hear the flavor of things. And MCM giving us, 4 minutes, whatever it was, to make a statement, I can tell you how little you can say in 4 minutes that's meaningful. So maybe we think next time about how election information and how the public media could play a better role in informing people about issues and the complexity of issues. That could be an improvement. But I feel like, and I don't blame MC, because the regular media is even worse. So, but you all are mission driven. Mm-hmm. So hopefully we can figure out how to play a better role in informing people about important issues in the county. But I think that I experienced the same thing last time. I ran a very narrow victory over Blair, and then another Democrat jumped in the race, and there was a Republican in race, and we wound up with a huge majority. And I suspect the same thing will happen again. I mean, at the end of the day, Reardon's not a Democrat, and I would say he has some simple answers for things. I don't think our issues are going to be solved by simple answers for things. You can't just say you're going to do something. You have to understand, could you actually do it? Yeah. And it turns out that it takes money and policies to do some of the things people want to do. It's just not going to happen because you declare you'd like it. This would be paradise if any of us were able to just declare what the future was going to look like, and then it materializes and everybody says, great.
Thank you. And just wondering, have you talked to Mr. Blair at all?
I talked to him after, when he conceded, and we had, a short, nice conversation. He wants to say, he's going to think about what he's going to do, but he definitely wants to continue to be involved in the county. And, I would suggest that, things like being involved on an ongoing basis on issue discussions and things, are important. And if he has suggestions, we're certainly willing to look at things he's talking about. I noticed in his economic plan, he has the very same thing I was talking about from Northern Virginia. That's part of his economic plan. We should have a very easy time coming to an agreement that we ought to shift our policies in that direction. So.
Okay, thank you. And I kind of wanted to go back to what you were saying about the TV ads and the Washington Post endorsement. I know you've spoken about that before, but how much of an impact do you really think that the TV ads, the Washington Post endorsement, all of that had?
A huge impact. I think the Post endorsement, I had a very big lead in the polls even after the Post endorsement, but the ability, and this is just like campaign strategy, so it's not personal, but if a candidate attacks somebody else and so this is my view, you did X, then voters say, well, it's the candidate against another candidate, and of course he disagrees. When a candidate can use an editorial that says things that aren't true, and then says the Washington Post says, as opposed to I say, then if people think of the paper as a validator, then that becomes you're using them to validate what you're saying. And an example would be the Post notion about mismanagement of the budget. So we just went through a bond rating. We got our AAA bond ratings again, and if you were read what the bond rating agency said about Montgomery County's fiscal management and the decisions we make, you would not get the opinion that we had driven the county to the brink of ruin. But the Post was able to say that with no factual basis. I mean, they objected to, the front-facing pay we gave our workers. That isn't mismanagement of the budget. And, there was something in there, I forget what this is where they mentioned the Fillmore, but they don't tell you that, the county did not get a very good deal out of the Fillmore. It never materialized as a job driver or something that drove restaurant occupancy in Silver Spring. The restaurant owners would tell you that. There was reasons that I thought the giveaway we did with Fillmore was a mistake. And there's a lot of people in the public who thought we got far too little for the lease we gave the Fillmore. So their ability to just say things without having to actually substantiate them is just kind of alarming.
Thank you. Kind of just to end, what is your overall message to Montgomery County residents?
I think you're in one of the healthiest counties in the country, and I don't just mean health-wise, but this is a county that was able to respond to the school system's need for additional resources and for increasing pay for teachers to make us competitive, and for fire and for police, frankly, as well. We were able to do that in this budget. We did it without raising taxes. We were able to put record amounts of money to deal with things like affordable housing. And that if you look around, you see lots of cranes going up. It's kind of interesting that, when somebody tells you there's nothing happening here and you drive down the road and you see cranes going up, it kind of underlies the fact that things are happening here. When you say everybody's leaving and then you deal with record housing prices, when everybody's leaving, housing prices don't go up. They usually decline. When housing prices go up because of competition for housing, it's a good sign that there's competition for housing. It's a problem that there's not enough housing to satisfy or that, to produce the kind of housing. But you got to think what the competition's for. The competition's for single-family homes. The big fight out there is over single-family homes and the prices of single-family homes. The county is a very largely built-out county. We all know that. Nobody's suggested, massive new single-family home developments. So it's going to be hard to see that not continue to go up over time. If you're a homeowner, other than the higher taxes you pay in the moment, the increasing value of your house in the long term is not a bad thing. It's not a good thing for affordable housing. But I think we're a lot healthier than people might have been led to believe. I think we've got a pretty good future laid out in front of us. I think the schools are going to make progress in getting the kids to recover from the impacts of COVID. I think you're going to see more and more businesses coming to Montgomery County. We've got an agreement with the University of Maryland to bring graduate level research. People have looked for that for as long as I was on the council to get the university more engaged over here. Well, we've got the university engaged. They want to bring a center for artificial intelligence. They want to put it in White Flint. And we were working with WMATA to recreate White Flint as a life sciences space. So there are a lot of things that I think are going to, really generate jobs, which of course generates additional tax revenue that'll let us continue to do the kind of things we need going forward. Hopefully, if we change our housing policies, which is collective, I can't do this by myself, but if there's a willingness on the council to look at, actually requiring the housing that matches what we know the needs are, then that's a nut we could probably crack as well. So I'd say that people should be optimistic. They should be engaged. We continue to listen to what people have to say. And, you would never hear me saying we don't need jobs and we don't need affordable housing. The question is, how do you get the jobs and how do you get the affordable housing? And we've been on this from day one. We're going to stay on it.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Elrich. I really appreciate it. But is there anything else you want to add or talk about, touch on?
I just want to, just thank, I'm sure this is most of your listeners for the way the public responded to COVID and to the work we did. Because, you don't get to be safe because the government says do something. It only happens when you believe this is something you should do, and then you do it. So the fact that people got masked, the fact that even though, I hated as much as everybody else not being able to be social. I mean, we all have the thing, whether it was movies or bands, which is my particular love of, in life. We all had to give up things and not do stuff that we wanted to do. Having a picnic in your daughter's backyard where you're sitting spaced apart from each other and you're not hugging anybody, none of us liked that. But on the other hand, it made this county safer. And it doesn't happen if the residents don't do it. And there are parts of the country where the advice was one way and people did what they wanted anyhow, and they paid a price for it. So I want to thank the residents of the county for understanding the value of following science and helping us get to where we got, and for people to continue to invest here and want to live here. We offer a lot. I think that people's willingness to stay in this county and to understand what we bring here helps make this county as great as it is. So it's part of the reason I'm very optimistic about the future, because you can talk about these things here. You can talk about the need for equity here in Montgomery County. And most people understand why you're doing that. So be able to work in a place where people share a large set of common values and are educated enough to understand the role of science and medicine, this is a good place to work.